Hello and welcome to Inkpot. I'm Grant Smith, and this is, I believe, part 4 of our drawing or painting Bolo series. And this is where we left off last time. And so, since I did a lot of work, and then I'm gonna do kind of like what I have been doing, I'm gonna work ahead on the left side and then show you guys how I did it on the right. So first thing is this. So it's quite a big difference. I changed up the horn here to be more like a ram's horn or something. I think it just looks cooler with this kind of like segmented area, and then I bled some of the light coming out in between the cracks of the horn. I added the little bumps on his skin there. What else did I do? I added a little bit more highlight to certain areas on the head. And another thing I did is I went in and I added more shadow to the area of the hair in certain sections just to give it more depth so that it's looking pretty flat. And there we added a lot more depth. It's kind of starting to look a little bit like the Tangled poster though, with all this shiny hair. I also changed the color of the hair slightly to a more greenish yellow instead of more of like a blonde. It just plays better with the blue, and it's closer to what it is in the original design. Another thing I did is I made the ring around the horn here just a little bit bigger. And we had our glow dodge. We had that before, but I also was playing around with how I'm going to add. I kept saying how I'm going to add a secondary highlight. Well, this is what I mean. So there's going to be a little underglow there. That's kind of a red light coming from below. And I think that really sets it off with the green, with the contrast between the red and the green. But I'm going to turn those off for while I'm painting here. Now, first thing I am going to do, you have seen how I did the horn ring here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to do this the simple way and copy that layer. And I'm just going to paste it over onto the other side here in a similar spot. And I'll just massage that over a little bit. All right. And then I'll get to work on the horn. To do that, I'm just going to pop on my original ink drawing again here. And I'm just going to turn off that layer just so I have a little bit of reference of my original colors. And I'm just going to grab that, turn my ink layer back on, and I'm just going to collapse a couple of let's collapse that layer. Merge that one with the layer below. And we'll just work on getting the shape of this horn here. Oops. Doing that on not the layer I want to do it on. So I'm just going to turn the new art layer back on again. And just kind of work out a few things here. I'm just gradiating that by pressing lighter. Bring that right down to the edge. There. I'm going to turn off that layer. Grab the true highlight color for that layer. It's more of this purplish tone. Change the size of my brush just a little so I can get in to certain areas here a little bit easier. Bring that kind of in the inner edge there too. Bring that out to the outer edge. Alright, so that gives pretty good indication of what that will be like. Turn off the ink drawing here for a second. And turn it back on. I'm getting a hard brush. It's a darker color. I'm just gonna kind of draw along where that crack in the horn is gonna go on this side. I'll just grab that green. I'm just gonna grab kind of a highlight color and just kind of give myself a little outline of the horn here. That's just gonna help guide everything else. I can always paint over it. It doesn't have to stay this way, but that way I can turn off the ink layer there and really work on stuff here. Oh, wrong brush for that. Now, what is going on here? Don't want that color. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to grab kind of the darker tone and that's maybe a little bit big. Bring that down and kind of build up the ridge that I'm going to be doing here. And start bringing in that more of a squared off shape there, kind of to the shape of my highlight there. I'm just gonna run a line along the back edge there too. All right. Now I got a line kind of down the center portion here too. And then one kind of along the back portion here. I'm just gonna make sure that's kind of similar to what we have in the other parts, and bring some form to the inner shape too. All right. Now, for this, I'm just kind of making it look a little bit more 3D by dimpling kind of the edges a bit, or the inner part, just so it has more of a shape than just by dimpling it. It's kind of just, this is where, you know, painting's like sculpting, like I say a lot. I'm just adding a little bit of texture on the inside there. It's going to indicate the shape a little bit. Yeah, I'm just going to soften up those edges that I had there, were pretty hard. I want them to be a little bit irregular too, so I want to play around with the shape of these this section of horn. Be more apparent when I go to the highlights for this part, but all right. Sorry, I got an itch here on my ear. It's bothering me. Just with the green, I'm just going to go over that too. Give it a little bit of a softer line. Give it a little bit more variation. I'll grab kind of my highlight color here that I had. And just indicate where the highlights are, and that's going to give a little bit more shape to this as well. Nice thing about something that's textured like this is you have a lot more room to kind of just play around with it. All that seems a little bright to me. Oops. Went back too far. Eraser brush here. Clean up that edge there. Also, I'm just gonna leave little, gotta make that a little bit bigger. Just little areas where the highlight would kind of be down into the gap there of the where the segments are in the horn. I'm gonna grab that color that I used on the inside of that one, and that'll kind of give me a good indication of what to use for the side. Alright, and now I'm just going to go in there and add kind of this green kind of into the cracked areas there, like I did the other side. Now I have my thickness of my brush up a little too high there. It should be a little bit more subtle. I'm just gonna grab a softer brush again, soften up that edge. Go back in here with darker color too. Alright, so that looks pretty similar to what we got on the other side here. I'm just gonna grab what I actually used for the highlight color there, and just add some of that in there instead of this kind of like grayish whitish kind of thing I had there. And just grab kind of what I used for the highlight on the back there, and I'm just gonna, I mean, I could have just copied it over, but I really want you guys to see the process of how I did them. And then of course when we go, we'll have to go to this glow layer, make sure that picks from only that layer my color, and then I will go to a softer brush again, oops, and make sure it's picking only from, oh, I'm not on the glow layer, that's why wasn't picking the right one, and just give all that in spots a nice little glow, and we'll add a little bit of glow onto the headphones here coming off there. Now if I bring in that secondary highlight again, I'm going to go to that layer, I'm going to grab that, and I'm just going to kind of work it along that point, just on here. I'll probably go in there with a soft eraser and just bring that back a bit too, as it's a little heavy-handed. So I'll just go in there, a few brushes of the soft eraser tool, and get you back to where you want to be. Cool. So now let's go do some hair on the other side. So I'm just, for now, I'm going to turn off the shadow layer on that hair. actually, let's not do that. First, let's do the let's do the body first here. Let's turn on my ink layer again. And make sure I'm on a larger size of brush. I want to grab this kind of blue. Oh, what layer am I on? Don't know what that layer is. Just deleting that layer. And make sure I'm on the right layer here. Why is my selection not working? Let's do obtain from display color then. That's what we probably use right now. Yeah, okay. Alright, so just putting in kind of where highlights would be hitting first. Let's get rid of that I just did there. Alright, and let's get it lighter color here. Oh, should probably turn that layer off. It's just going to help with selecting my colors properly. Sure I don't go too heavy on some of this. Bigger brush again. I'm just going to grab my blender and smoothen out those areas. Turn off my ink layer. If I want to keep some of the stroke feeling of what I put down, then I'll use then I will use the blender in the direction, same direction as I was putting my strokes down. Now what I did down here in the highlights, I put a little bit of that kind of pinkish tone. I just want that in the chest. Just because in the actual character design, he is a little bit of he's a little bit brighter in the chest than in other places. His actual skin tone is different there. Let's get that blender again. Now you'll see that there's kind of like this kind of texture. So I went in there with a actually textured brush later or after, and I could show you guys that right here soon. That's a little too hard. There we go. Just taking that tone down a bit in spots. Doing that by just going over lightly certain areas. I'm going to turn my ink layer back on, and I am going to grab kind of this purpley color, and that's just so I can kind of put in a highlight that's going to indicate to me where kind of the shoulder line is. That way I can turn off my ink layer and not have to use it. It gives me an idea of where that's going to be. I'm just going to really take that down a notch, because I might actually keep it as a kind of hair light kind of lighting there. So for this kind of speckly stuff, I just used there's different scatter brushes in here. I think what I used was debris. I'm just going to grab that color and add some of that in there in spots. Just makes the skin not look quite so so smooth and uniform. I'll actually do that with the light blue or the dark blue in spots here, the kind of navy I have going on. Also gives you more of what kind of like pores on the skin, give you that kind of texture. All right, now I'm going to go to the hair here. I'm going to grab kind of more of the mid dark tone here of the hair. Pop my ink layer back on, just so I have something to kind of work with of what I wanted to do, how large and section this mutton chop kind of area is. And I'm just going to close that out so I can fill it. I can turn off my ink layer, go back to my hair layer here, and continue working on the hair. Now I'm going to have to go in there on here, on this side too, and just finish out that edge a little bit better with some more hairs. Now, just any place where I see the current stuff I just drew overlapping, I'll just have to go in there for now and erase those sections. But when I flatten this, that's when I can fix those areas. I'm grabbing a fairly bright area, and then I want a tapered brush with some texture. Just so I can paint those shapes in there. Now this brush is a dual paint brush, so it's using the background color and the foreground color. You don't have to use a brush like that though. In some ways it would actually be easier with the not to, but I want to kind of experiment with it a little bit, so I don't use them that much. You can kind of see why, because I'm getting kind of random areas there that should be highlight. So I'm going to actually switch to a brush that I don't think this one has the dual texture, does it? Let's go on a piece there. Or actually, maybe down here. Yeah, I think that's better. Just gonna decrease the size of that a little bit. I'm just gonna grab a darker color here, go in there. Kind of let the forms kind of find themselves in here. And then I'll actually go in with my kind of flatter brush that doesn't taper. And I'm just gonna give it a little bit of global kind of darkening in areas to more define the shape. And grab the highlight, do the same thing with the highlight. Just lighten up the parts that I know are gonna be brighter. Now I'm gonna go in there with a brush that's a harder brush, and that's kind of the areas where I know that there's gonna be kind of the highlight coming across. I'm kind of just pulling out some of the highlights of the strands there, but I will make sure that I'm putting some of the strands throughout. And now I need the bright color here. I don't know if I'm getting the, so pump that up a little bit. It's better. Oh. If I ever need to, just lower my. Now I am using, this one is a little bit sensitive also to pressure for opacity. that one I was using, which was the rough brush of those. Okay. All right, so that's looking pretty good. It doesn't have the bright highlights there, but I'm gonna go in there in the final step of the hair and do those. Now let's fill this other side out with some hair. Oops. Just gonna go along here. For now. Give it a little bit of You know what? I'm just gonna do it with the pen instead. I'm just gonna go in. All right, let's use a more solid pen. 1 second. It feels like it's gotten 10 degrees hotter in here all of a sudden, so just turning off the... Oh, must be saving. Oh. No, my pen, when I put it down. Another thing that sucks about this monitor is these pens are very low quality. The plastic housing on them always breaks. I'm not the only one who's talked about this issue. These Yanovas, just it's kind of like a known problem with them. Is that the pens break. You can buy a more like a, I guess they call a professional level pen, but or a pro pen. Just I hear it does the same thing. So, and it's not cheap either. I think it's like $60, and if I'm gonna spend that much more on it, it better work. So yeah, so that's why I haven't invested in one of those. Let's grab a bigger size. Oh, too big. I'm just going in with my regular oil brush here, just so I can get some shapes in there of kind of how we want that hair to kind of go in. Oops. Maybe a little too much there. I left kind of where the horns would kind of leave a shadow on the back there too. I'll just go grab the brighter one here. Another thing sometimes I'll do is I'll use a blending brush to with a taper. So when I mean a taper, let's just start a new window here. So here's a hard brush, and when I mean taper, it goes from, or let's go to a different brush here. It goes from thin to small depending on how much I press, as opposed to, say, this brush where it doesn't get any thinner or smaller, but the lighter I press, the lighter it paints. So I never really indicated how exactly that works, and so I figured I might as well show you guys that. Now, just gonna grab this one, grab that kind of lighter. Oh, I was wondering why that wasn't the right brush. And this one has a bit of a taper to it. This is not a blending brush though. I'll show you guys better right here. So I made a blending brush called the oil blender here. I just took one of these and I just added a taper to the I think it was the gouache blending brush. So I just took that and added a taper to it. So if it actually works better if I'm using kind of smaller, but you can see there I can kind of pull the strands out of the highlighted sections. It's a little soft though. I'm just gonna grab that highlighted brush again and bring that size down. Now this is more just the techniques that you would use for more like flowing hair. Not exactly the same like if you were going to do fur and stuff. That's quite different. And I find that way more difficult actually. I'm going in there with, I was going in there with the highlight with the dark. Now I'm just going to go in and add some shadow strands as well. And just going back to my regular oil painting brush that I usually use here. Up that size a little bit. And just in areas I want darker, and smooth out the transition in certain areas. Back to I'm gonna use the rough India ink brush here, and make sure I have the highlight tone there. And just make sure I get some highlights throughout kind of these areas here. And now I had this shadow hair section where I used a soft brush. I just took the darkest tone in the picture, and this way I can just kind of create more of a smooth transition of the brightness to darkness there in certain areas of the hair. And I'm going to do the same with the lighter areas. Just going to add a little bit of glow, basically, to those sections over top of everything here. Cool. So there we got in some hair there for him. So let me just turn back on my secondary highlight layer there. And I'm just going to add in some of that red tone that's coming up from below to some of the sections here. And all right. So I'm getting to the point here where it's almost done, I'm thinking. What I am going to do is I'm just going to flatten all these layers here. I'm going to merge selected layers. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to undo. And then I'm going to paste. So I got one layer here that has all of my other work merged into one layer. Reason why I'm doing it that way is just in case I find an issue with something I've done, I can go back and change it. And in fact, let me just gonna, oops, grab this background layer here too. And I'm gonna merge that one too. I'm just going to grab, make sure my glow and highlight layer is off. I'm just going to grab this kind of purple and lower that size down of that tool. Just going to go in there, add a little secondary kind of hair light to that side of the horn there too. I'm just going to take this blue that I had here just so it's uniform in there. And as you can see, I actually put that stuff on the wrong layer. So it's a good thing I checked that I've kind of did what I did here. So I'm just going to blend that. And then when I go to the glow here, secondary highlight layer, now I'm just going to go over those areas. I'm using a blender, that's why it's not doing anything. So I'm just going to go in there. Right, and just put a little bit. Where's my red tone? I don't know why I was going more of a white tone there. You know what? I'm just going to get my eraser tool, erase that. I need it to be larger selection there. And delete. Grab. I'm going to go back to my original layer here, and I am going to properly fix the color transition here. So we'll just make sure that that's the color it should be, or closer to. Might need to go back in there and run that speckle again. in some spots. But we'll see. Let's grab my gouache blender there, smoothing out that a little bit. Alright, now I'll go back to my secondary highlight area, make sure it's picking from that layer only, my picker, color picker, and then go in there. That's better. Give these kind of highlights that are coming from the layer below object. Just gonna grab my blender here for areas that need to be smoothed out, softened. And I want to go darker in the kind of recesses here too. And that I need to make sure I'm on the right layer. Turn my secondary glow layer off. And it's not the brush I was looking to use, but now to make these show up a little bit better, I add a shadow in behind them on the other side. So I'm just going to repeat that kind of on this side here as well. And I'm just going to get a softer brush now and soften that transition. Okay. Turn back on my secondary highlight. Turn back on my, not ink layer, my glow layer. And we're getting pretty close to done. So I just need to do kind of spot fixes of stuff. I'm just gonna tone down the edge of some of this here. And some more stray hairs in the kind of whisker, or not whisker, in the kind of mutton chop thing he's got going on here. Just make sure that none of those are kind of just disappearing. By that I mean that they're not just kind of fading out to nothing, like that edge of that brush stroke. Just so give it a look so it has like some strands of hair coming off of it there. We're gonna do the same over here. Now you can tell that I did these on different days. They're a little bit different in the way I approach them. I'm just going to go in there and try and make it look a little bit closer to the other side. This one's just more saturated than the side is seeming to be, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to circle this meaty portion of this area, and then I'm gonna blur the border of that one. 10 pixels looks good. And then I'm going to go to edit here, tonal correction, hue, saturation, brightness. And I'm just going to add some saturation to that. Now I can turn that on and off and you can see the difference. Just so it matches the other side a little bit better. Oops. I just press cancel instead of OK. I'll try that again. So up the saturation, lower the luminosity a little. Preview on, preview off. It's just subtle, but it's enough to kind of bring a little bit more cohesion to that portion. Oh, one thing I am missing is these kind of like spiky kind of areas here. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut, or hold the shift button. Oops. Hold the shift button. And if this stupid bar for it would go to the right place, I'm gonna copy that, paste it, kind of like we did for the other side. Now flip it, and let's just do something there. Deselect, and there, we've got some spiky bits on that side now too. All right, so this is where I'm just gonna start going in with make sure I merge that layer that I just made down. And now I'm just going to go in there with a harder brush, the kind of universal kind of highlight kind of tone. So I'm just going to add some really bright highlights to areas here. Now, you know what? I'm going to do that on a different layer. I'm going to probably soften those up with the blender or something at some point, but just for now, kind of getting in stuff in where I think I want it to go. Just spots where I think the light is really going to be hitting. And going to be spots where it's going to be really putting off a little bit more of a highlight. This is kind of how I get like a kind of like a finishing touch on what I'm doing. So you can see it really does help pull stuff out and make it look a little bit more finished. I mean, you can be working on your highlighting as you go like this, but I find it's more, I find it easier to do when I'm more in this kind of nearly completed stage, for sure. It's just saving in the background right now. Whenever it does that, I'll usually save again. So I don't really like way recovery files work. So even though I know it's got one there, I'm just gonna go and do that on my own anyways. I'm just kind of doing like squigglies and dots for a lot of these. I'm gonna go and probably soften them up a little bit. Your highlights don't need to be super sharp. If you like them that way, definitely just go and do them that way, but I kind of want the look to be a little bit so it blends in a little bit better with what I've done. This area here, probably where the highlights are. It's gonna do a little bit more there. And on this side too, I'm just gonna bring out that highlight a little bit more. Oh, cancel. That's why I'm not always the biggest fan of hotkeys, is because you'll accidentally make changes and not always be able to control Z out of it. So, gotta be careful with that. I'm just putting some different highlights in there. Probably do something similar to what I did with the kind of speckled highlight that I was doing. I'll probably do something similar to in here now. So let's go and I'm gonna use a different tool this time. I'm gonna use their spray one here, the default brush. Not really liking that. Let's try the tone scraping. A little big. The nice thing about some of these tools too that's really kind of cool is that you can kind of go back on them a little bit. You can change the particle size depending on the size of your brush too, which is kind of cool. Just giving some of these highlights a little bit more texture to them. Let's grab my dark, or no, let's leave that. Okay. So we're looking pretty close to being finished here. What else do I want to do for a finishing touch? Now it's going to soften up some of that. So I'm just going to go in here with the gouache blender again. And just parts that kind of like the edges of stuff I'll usually kind of soften up little areas, or something where it just seems distractingly highlighted a little bit. And just smooths out the transition of some of that. All right, cool. So I think the only thing left on this one is some color correction. So one thing I've been playing around with was this. So that makes it way more dramatic. It just ups the contrast a little. So what did I do here? Is I went into color balance, and in shadow, how did I get this first of all? So you go to layer, you go to new correction layer, and this is a color balance layer. Now that will affect any layers that are below it. So if I double click it here, so in shadows, I upped the blue tone, which really helped increase the contrast. And then in the halftone, I upped the green and red. And in the highlight, I push it towards magenta and cyan. There's the keep brightness section here. So you see how bright I had it originally. And I don't want that. It's generally how I do it. All my stuff is generally a little bit light, and then I will go back in and usually I'll usually add some sort of overall color correction, just to, sorry, I just noticed a section here that's missing something. Just, there's a little horn there. I need a brush. That's not a blender. I'm just gonna go in there. And then I'm just gonna use the gouache blender. Shape that a little bit. Little soft highlight just to indicate that there's something there. And then I just up the contrast. I just find I get a better global lighting situation when I do stuff this way, where I kind of up the contrast a little after. I'm thinking that's looking a little bit overly saturated, so I'm just going to grab my hue. I'm just going to create a new correction layer with the hue saturation. I'm just going to play around with the hue a little bit to see, just play around to see what else we could do. So I'm going to keep it closer to what I had, but I am going to warm it up a bit. I think I maybe did the cooling a little bit. And the saturation, I'm just going to desaturate it a little bit. It's just a point where it becomes too cartoony looking. Okay, so I can quickly see now, depending on how you have these layers stacked, it will make a difference too. So you can see here and here. So I just pushed it a little bit more to the orange tone there. And then with this one, I just brought the darkness level by adding some blue to that, my darkest color, and the shadows, and I'm pretty happy with that. So let's do the close-up here, close-up section. I'm just going to grab a good brush here, the decent size, and shrink that panel. And if I can get this to zoom not so quickly, so I can kind of just fill the screen with it there, yeah. Now another layer, grab the highlight color. Oops, and I want that. I am gonna need to open that up for 1 second, obtain display color. And I'm just gonna put a signature in here. Now, I did have some other ideas too for this, like possibly doing a platform or a ship like floating in front of him just to add to the scale of this design. But we'll see. Maybe I eventually will. Sorry, just gonna check out what that big binging noise on my phone was. If it recognizes my fingerprint. Oh, someone just liked a comment I put on something. Not my best signature. I might go in there after and fix that up, but for now, I'm just gonna keep that there. So yeah, I was thinking of possibly, well, let me see, just quickly, tunnel space ship. So I was thinking about putting the Galaxy 1 kind of floating in the foreground in front of him, but we'll see. Control B. I'm just going to see how something like that would work. So I'm just going to do that by grabbing this and cutting it out here. Not the best cutout job, but and delete that layer. Control T or deselect it. Control T. And have it kind of floating off to there. But I just think that it'll lose something a little bit. But it's an idea I have. So I might go in there and change that at some point, but I think that's it. Let's go back to zoom that in a little bit more. And so there is the final version of my illustration of Bolo. And if you guys have watched all of these, thank you for watching, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview right now of what's coming in October. So in October, I want to be doing mostly kind of horror related digital painting series. And what I'm going to start with, this is just the preliminary idea I have here, is this here. So basically we got this pregnant lady here holding her belly, looking over to someone who's off screen here, who looks terrified, and she's kind of wondering like, what's wrong? What are you looking at? And then in the mirror, you see that there's this different version of what's going on. So she's kind of got these white glowing eyes, she's disheveled, and her belly is now some little demon creature. And I think that's going to look really nice and creepy. And we got the nice underlighting here. So that'll be the next project we work on. So I hope you guys can move over to that one after with me as well. So thank you for